Dracula is the most portrayed literary character in cinema and television. By now, most people know that the vampire villain in Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula is based loosely on the 15th century Romanian ruler Vlad Dracula, known as Țepiș, the Impaler. In modern-day Romania, he is a national hero. He even got his own postage stamp in communist-era Romania. The connection between Prince Vlad Dracula the Warlord and Count Dracula the Vampire is, of course, from the imagination of Bram Stoker and not an actual Romanian legend. Though it is interesting that in the folklore of Eastern Europe, including Romania, the popular way to dispatch a vampire is by driving a wooden stake through its body. Ironically, it was the favorite way of Vlad the Impaler to dispatch his enemies. Welcome to Trailing Monsters. It appears that Bram Stoker originally planned to set his vampire story in Styria, now Graz, Austria. So enamored he was by J. Sheridan Le Fanu's 1872 vampire tale Carmilla. But when he learned about Vlad the Impaler, his vampire now had a name: Dracula. And a new setting: Transylvania. The land beyond the forest. And what did Dracula look like? Nicola Modrusa, who personally knew Vlad, described him as follows. He was not very tall, but very stocky and strong, with a cold and terrible appearance, a strong and aquiline nose, swollen nostrils, a thin and reddish face, in which the very long eyelashes framed large, wide-open green eyes. The bushy black eyebrows made them appear threatening. His face and chin were shaven, but for a mustache. The swollen temples increased the bulk of his head. A bull's neck connected with his head, from which black curly locks hung on his wide-shouldered person. Compare this first-hand experience to Bram Stoker's vampire, and it is patently obvious that his description is influenced by historical sources, with, of course, some liberties. His face was a very strong aquiline, with high bridge of the thin nose and peculiarly arched nostrils, with lofty domed forehead and hair growing scantily round the temples, but profusely elsewhere. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, and with bushy hair that seemed to curl in its own profusion. The mouth, so far as I could see it under the heavy mustache, was fixed and rather cruel-looking, with peculiarly sharp white teeth. These protruded over the lips, whose remarkable ruddiness showed astonishing vitality in a man of his years. For the rest, his ears were pale and, at the tops, extremely pointed. The chin was broad and strong, and the cheeks firm though thin. The general effect was one of extraordinary pallor. There are scant references in the novel to the historical Dracula. Several times the Count mentions the old battles against the invading Turks as if he himself had been there. Also, he declares about an ancestor. Woe was it that his own unworthy brother, when he had fallen, sold his people to the Turk and brought the shame of slavery on them. This is, in fact, history. Some background. Vlad's father belonged to the Order of the Dragon and was known as Vlad Dracul, which means dragon or even devil in Romanian. By the rules of Romanian grammar, his son, also Vlad, was known as Dracula, son of Dracul. In 1442, Vlad Dracul, the father, was held against his wishes in Turkey by the Ottoman Sultan. When released, as a guarantee that he wouldn't trouble the Turks further, he left his sons, Vlad, about age 12, and Radu, who came to be known as Radu the Handsome, aged about 7. Vlad, the son, was released in 1448, but Radu remained until 1462, and he then remained in league with the Turks, hence Bram Stoker's reference to his own unworthy brother. Romania is located in the southeast of Central Europe, with a population of about 19 million people in 2022. It's a little larger than the American state of Minnesota, covering about 92,000 square miles or 238,000 square kilometers. The capital is Bucharest, and there you will find a nice European blend of the modern and the traditional. And while Romania has a rich culture to offer the visitor, it is also more than willing to capitalize on its most infamous son. Bucharest is located in the Romanian province of Wallachia. In fact, Vlad the Impaler was Prince of Wallachia, and it's where one can find his mountain castle, the citadel Panari. It is some 850 meters up in the mountains. That's nearly 3,000 feet high. Unfortunately, in 2022, the Romanian government chose to close Panari to tourists, citing the dangers of the 1,480 steps badly in need of repair and the presence of bears. Once the government makes the necessary repairs and deals with the pesky bears, the site will be reopened. According to the locals, that means not to make plans to visit anytime soon. But we were fortunately able to get close enough to see it from a distance. The original tower dates back to the 14th century, and in the 1450s, Vlad completed some earthquake repair work and built onto the fortress with slave labor made up of the boyars, leaders who had been plotting to kill him until they were exposed. Vlad literally exposed them. He had them worked to death. Their clothes even ripping and tearing and wearing away, falling off their bodies from the work. Basically, a worker's shift ended when he dropped over dead. It was also from this citadel that Vlad's first wife, Anastasia Holzanska, committed suicide by throwing herself to the river below. Not much is known about her overall, and one version of the story, the more romantic one, was that she received fake news that Vlad had been killed in battle and she did not want to fall into the hands of the invading Turks. The other story is that she learned that her dear Vlad wanted to marry his mistress, the blonde German Katharina Ziegel, and in a fit of jealousy, she ended her own life. Vlad did remarry, but not with Katharina. Instead, for political reasons, he married the Hungarian noblewoman Ilona Zelagi. Back to the novel. Remember Jonathan Harker's encounter with the 3 vampire brides and that hideous bag? I was not alone. The room was the same, unchanged in any way since I came into it. I could see along the floor in the brilliant moonlight my own footsteps marked where I had disturbed the long accumulation of dust. In the moonlight opposite me were 3 young women, ladies by their dress and manner. I thought at the time that I must be dreaming when I saw them, for though the moonlight was behind them, they threw no shadow on the floor. They came close to me and looked at me for some time and then whispered together. 2 were dark and had high aquiline noses like the Count's and great dark piercing eyes that seemed to be almost red when contrasted with the pale yellow moon. The other was fair as can be, with great wavy masses of golden hair and eyes like pale sapphires. They join in common critique of the Count. You yourself never loved. You never loved. And he replies, yes, I too can love. You yourselves can tell it from the past. Is it not so? And then toward the end of the novel, when Van Helsing finds the tombs of the vampire brides, he says, I find in a high, great tomb as if made to one much beloved, that other fair sister, you know, the blonde. She gets a favored domicile. Bram Stoker never names the 3 brides of Dracula in the novel. What do you say we call them? Anastasia, Ilona, and Katerina. Although Vlad was known as Prince of Wallachia, his birthplace was, you guessed it, up north in Transylvania. So, it is to Transylvania we go, making sure to take advantage of the scenic route. Zigeushwara in Transylvania is located on the Tarnava River and was founded by German Saxons. There has, however, been a population on this spot since the 6th century BC. Here, the citadel dates back to the 12th century, having been built on top of a former Roman fort. In 1999, Zigeushwara was established as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This clock tower in the Citadel Square was built in the second half of the 14th century and completed in the 16th. The clock has been working continuously since then.
Yes, in fact, I am standing here in Sighișoara, Romania, at the actual location of the birthplace of Vlad the Impaler, Dracula himself, in the year 1431.
The building is now a nice restaurant and serves a delicious goulash. The top floor, which was built much later, contains the Museum of Weapons. It was in 1435 that the family moved to Târgoviște, a place we will visit presently. And sure enough, the Citadel Square contains this prominent monument to Sighișoara's favorite son. Once again, we find in a medieval Romanian city a testimony to the influence of Vlad the Impaler, Dracula. Like his father before him, Vlad the Impaler ruled Wallachia from the city of Târgoviște. It was the one-time capital of Romania and is located about 80 kilometers or 50 miles from the current capital of Bucharest. In fact, it was Vlad the Impaler who constructed this impressive Hindia Tower, also known as the Sunset Tower. It is 27 meters or 89 feet high and guarded by what I like to call the steampunk Dracula.
This is from the top of the Sunset Tower, constructed by Vlad the Impaler here in Târgoviște, which used to be the capital city of Romania. This is the place where Vlad wreaked vengeance on his enemies, the Saxon nobles, and sent them in a beeline to build his castle in Poianari, where they literally worked themselves to death building his citadel there.
It was here in Târgoviște that Vlad the Impaler is said to have left a golden goblet at the city fountain, so anyone could get himself or herself a drink. No one would dare steal it and face the wrath of the Impaler. One day the goblet was gone, and that is how the people knew that Vlad was dead.
This is the castle in Târgoviște, and Vlad the Impaler did make his home here for a while, so we could say this is indeed, while he did not have it built, Dracula's castle for all intents purposes. This is the location, if you know the famous story, when the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire sent his envoys to visit with Vlad. They walked into his courtroom wearing turbans. Vlad wanted to know why they showed such disrespect for him by not removing the turbans. Well, he knew perfectly well what the custom was. The answer was, I'm sorry, it is not our way. We don't remove our turbans. So Vlad the Impaler decided, then I will help you not ever have to remove your turbans again. And he infamously nailed the turbans to these men's heads.
Warfare between Romania and the Ottoman Empire was ongoing, and matters only became worse when word got out that Vlad had made an alliance with the King of Hungary. When Sultan Mehmed II marched on Târgoviște in June of 1462, Vlad the Impaler one night disguised himself as a Turk and infiltrated the Ottoman camp with plans to assassinate the Sultan. Unfortunately for Vlad, he went to the wrong tent. He then led his troops against the camp during the famous night attack on Târgoviște. Mehmed was able to resist Vlad's troops, and as he marched on, he came across an astonishing sight, a testimony to what Vlad the Impaler was capable of. The Sultan found 23,844 dead Turks, at least according to Vlad's records, impaled high on stakes. The Sultan then turned his army around, left, and went to plunder and destroy elsewhere. What the Ottomans encountered that day came to be known as the Forest of the impaled. And finally, Târgoviște was the setting for one more Vlad the Impaler story. Dracula had decided to gather all of the city homeless and beggars and invite them to a banquet in their honor. Along with plenty of food, Vlad offered entertainment. Who could resist such an offer? The word is that no one turned down his invitation. In the middle of the celebration, as the less fortunate feasted and admired the dancers, Vlad ordered the building to be set fire and burned to the ground. The flames rose quickly, and no one escaped. The next morning, no one in town was any more annoyed by bothersome beggars in the streets. At the end of the novel Dracula, the expedition headed by Jonathan Harker and Professor Van Helsing caught up with the Count's box of earth in which he lay. Mina Harker describes how the Count was finally destroyed.
But on the instant came the sweep and flash of Jonathan's great knife. I shrieked as I saw it shear through the throat, whilst at the same moment Mr. Morris's bowie knife plunged into the heart. It was like a miracle, but before our very eyes, and almost in the drawing of a breath, the whole body crumbled into dust and passed from our sight.
Interesting, in history, Vlad the Impaler also had his head severed. In his war against the Ottoman Empire, he was finally killed in battle in December of 1476. He was 45 years old. His head was afterwards cut off, placed in a jar of honey for preservation, and sent to the Ottoman Sultan to display. The Romanian Orthodox Snagov Monastery, which Vlad himself had built, contains his grave. In fact, the street on which the property is located is called the Monastery of Vlad the Impaler Street.
Excavations of the grave later on, however, found something quite interesting. There simply is no body inside that tomb. Well, there are different theories as to why. Some feel that perhaps grave robbers are to blame, perhaps maybe monks moved the body not wanting someone with such a reputation to be buried in such a location so close to the altar of the church. And then, of course, there are those who say, well, the reason he's not there is because he never was to begin with. Where the battle took place, where Vlad the Impaler was killed, there's another monastery, and some suggest, well, he's just somewhere inside there. Of course, there's always that third possibility.
On our way out, our local guide drew attention to the map of the monastery grounds, pointing out that it was in the shape of a dragon. Remember that the name Dracula means, literally, son of the dragon. So, we have two images of Dracula, the original, Vlad Tepes, who, as has already been stated, is a national hero in Romania, protecting the people from the Ottoman Empire. Yet he was Tepes, the Impaler, and all of the reputation that goes along with that. And we also have the popular image of Dracula the Vampire, started by Bram Stoker in his 1897 novel, and continuing throughout today in the movies. Is there one image that is preferred? Perhaps the answer can be found in this little trinket that I picked up in Sighișoara, Transylvania, the birthplace of Vlad the Impaler. If you'd like to take an informed tour of Romania and learn more about Vlad the Impaler, as well as Romanian vampire legends, stay tuned to the closing credits where we'll point you in the right direction. Also, we'll let you know what to expect in the next episode of Trailing Monsters.